Reviewing the Chifley home site, I was interested in the inclusion of Elizabeth Chifley's recipes, including the Honourable Dunking Biscuit, the ginger nut. Of course, I had to try her recipe and make some. Very different to modern day ginger nuts, thankfully not as jaw-breaking. I was also drawn to the mention of the habit she had for collecting useful recipes in a book of her own. This one, crusted with sugar, is my grandmother's version of the same thing. My grandmother would have only been slightly younger than Elizabeth Chifley, so I imagine that the books are actually filled with the same kinds of recipes. And just as my grandmother used to do this in her own lifetime, so did my mother. And just like my mother, I also do it. I don't recall being shown this habit. It's not something that was ever told to me as a useful or worthwhile thing to do, and yet it is something I have always done and continue to do. And this book is something that I use almost every day. This unconscious repeating of habits made me think of Michel de Certeau and his writings on the practice of everyday life. In his second volume, Living and Cooking, de Certeau talks about ways of operating, things that we remember from before now. And in the same volume, Lucy Guillard talks about gesture sequences and sense memory. Guillard says about the culinary process that it requires a multiple of memory, a memory of apprenticeship, of witnessed gestures, and of consistencies in order. Elizabeth surely inherited her practices from family, as we all do, articulated in domestic practice, yet not necessarily written down or spoken, maybe only expressed in spatial grammars. So it's this notion of gesture sequences that I'm really interested in. I like the idea of trying to express sequences of gestures in the form of a collection. The kinds of domestic objects that we collect almost unconsciously. These are seeds from all kinds of fruits and vegetables that we've eaten in our house. They've been wrapped in waxed thread, and they're sitting on buttons from my collection of many years. I'd like to try for a book of traces, a book of vestige, but I'm not quite sure yet what form the book will take. I would like it to have a sense of time and practice and routine, and a sense of layers and actions from other places. I'm going to try for a tangible sense of something that is fundamentally intangible.